Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Izzy from the city of Sunnyvale, and I will be moderating tonight's program. Along with our co-sponsor, Bosca, and our instructor, Chris Corvetti, I want to welcome you all to our class. Before we begin the program, I'm going to provide some guidelines for successful participation in the webinar. First, all attendees are muted by default to reduce background noise to the presentation. If you would like to ask a question, you can do so in two ways. The first option is to use the raise hand feature. I will then call upon you and unmute you to ask your question. And if possible, let's save verbal questions until the end of the presentation tonight. The second option is to type your question in the Q&A. I will then read questions to the instructor or respond directly in the chat. I'd also like to note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on Bosca's website. Now that we have that out of the way, I'd like to share a little background on Bosca's landscape education program. Bosca is a special district that represents the interests of 26 cities, water districts, and private water companies, all of which purchase wholesale water from the San Francisco Regional Water Supply. Bosca member agencies collectively serve over 1.8 million residents and 40,000 businesses in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties. Bosca's goal is to ensure a reliable supply of high-quality water at a fair price for our agencies and their customers. Consistent with that goal, Bosca provides a regional water conservation program to support our agencies in improving water use efficiency. The landscape education program is one element of that conservation program. While we have made significant strides in water use efficiency in the past decade, there's still more room for improvement. Outdoor water use represents the single largest untapped opportunity for water conservation in the Bosca service area. Outdoor water use reduction through the use of water-efficient plants and innovative techniques can help conserve water and ensure that future water supply needs of our communities are met. A few highlights on additional conservation programs that may be of interest to you. Valley Water has several rain barrel rebate options, as you can see here. You can get up to $35 for installing a rain barrel, 50 cents a gallon for installing a cistern, and $1 per square foot of a rain garden. Bosca has a landscape rebate program which provides rebates to customers of participating water agencies for replacing water-intensive lawn space with water-efficient landscaping. Bosca also has the I Heart Greywater program, which gives residents up to $200 in rebates for connecting a washing machine to a greywater irrigation system. Next, there's the Bosca Lawn Be Gone rebate, which gives residents various rebates for transforming their lawns and making them more water efficient. Another program by Bosca is the Smart Controller program, which provides instant rebates and heavily discounted pricing on purchase of the Ratio 3 irrigation controller. This controller can be operated on your smartphone and normally retails for $280. Through this program, customers of participating water agencies can purchase a controller for $100 plus tax. For more information or to find out which of these programs are available in your area, visit bayareaconservation.org. Sunnyvale encourages you to participate in rebate programs offered by Valley Water. Valley Water offers $2 per square foot of rebates for replacing your lawns and plants that require a lot of water with drought-tolerant plants or permeable hardscape. They also offer up to $200 in rebates for properties that connect a close washer to a greywater irrigation system. And in order to qualify for these rebates, please make sure that you apply first. A common mistake is that residents get very excited about the rebates and start transforming their lawn before making sure that they actually qualify. Also, are you looking for compost? Free compost and mulch are available for Sunnyvale residents at the Smart Station. Stop by Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with your own shovel and container. Additional information on water-wise gardening can be found on southbaygreengardens.org, where they also have some landscape designs and templates as well. It's a great way to get some ideas before you go ahead and apply for those rebates. This is a snapshot of the Water-Wise Gardening website. It provides resources to support residents in water-efficient landscape renovations and management. Resources include a gallery of gardens with plants identified, plant selection tool, and even a watering calculator. If you enjoyed tonight's program, we invite you to check out Bosca's upcoming webinar classes. You can view the full schedule and register at bayareaconservation.org. If you are interested in staying up to date with Sunnyvale's Environmental Services Department, make sure to subscribe or follow us on social media. Feel free to go ahead and scan the QR codes or search using the green text provided. We share tips and tricks for living sustainably in Sunnyvale, as well as rebate information and upcoming events. If you have questions about the rebate programs, please contact Valley Water for more information. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our instructor, Chris Corvetti. Chris moved to California upon completion of 2 years of Peace Corps service in Mongolia, where she first experienced water scarcity. Oops. I think I just lost my notes there. Where she first experienced water scarcity in Mongolia. As a member of the Watershed Stewards AmeriCorps program, Chris delved into issues surrounding water conservation specific to the Bay Area. Since the end of her AmeriCorps service in 2017, Chris has worked with numerous local nonprofits and municipalities to install rain harvesting systems through the Bay Area. Chris, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can take it away.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now.
Yes, can see it. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about rain barrels and the bigger question of why harvest rainwater. I'm gonna make this really easy and put some answers right on the screen for you for the why. But if most of you are here, you already know why you want to harvest rainwater. I'm just gonna give you some more ideas on why this can be really beneficial. Oops. Let's bring that back. So a lot of the reasons most homeowners they're thinking about their water bill, moisture around their house. They're thinking about, using less municipal water, and they're thinking about less maintenance required than many other more traditional watering systems. But this is also a great way to prevent erosion and local flooding in your neighborhood. It can help replenish groundwater. It can reduce pollution in the creeks, so it'll make a healthier watershed overall. And also your plants are going to be happier and healthier without the chlorinated municipal water coming in. So these are some great reasons, and we have a nice little picture of a large system of 495 gallons in Palo Alto on the left. So I'm going to use some words like watershed and runoff and pollution. So I just want to define a couple of those really quickly. A watershed is the area where the water is going to go if it lands anywhere within that area on the ground. So we live in the San Francisco Bay area, San Francisco Bay watershed. So any water that we dump that is going to make its way into our creeks and down the whole line out into the bay. So that's one of the things that we want to think about, is keeping the bay healthier as well as our local creeks. So runoff can carry a lot of different pollutants, and they're not the most pleasant things to have in our creeks, and they can really hurt our native wildlife. You can get runoff from your roof, from your driveways, from the roadways, from parking lots, any of the areas that are hardscaped. So this all ends up in a storm drain. When we get a big rain, you see the water flowing down the side of the road and going into those grates on the side of the road. Those are called storm drains. A lot of people think that the storm drains get filtered and cleaned before they go into their creek, but that's actually not the case. Storm drains go directly into the creek and straight out into the bay without any filtration or cleaning whatsoever. So any of those pollutants that end up on our roads end up in a large rainstorm getting pulled into polluted runoff into our creeks. The water that does get treated is that household wastewater. That's the water that goes from your sinks, your toilets, your shower. That goes into a sewer pipe. It goes to a wastewater treatment plant, and that gets treated and comes out clean on the other side. But the storm drains are what we're going to talk about tonight, since they do not get treated and cleaned. So one of the ways to reduce that pollution is called slow it, spread it, and sink it. So the idea here is that if we can slow down all that water running off, we can spread it out and give it time to sink into the ground. So one of the ways that we can do that is through rainwater harvesting. And this gives the water just time to sink into the ground and prevent it from running off and carrying our man-made pollutants into our creeks. So this is pretty straightforward, right? We don't want this trash in our creeks. And, can we actually help that by harvesting the rainwater? Can a rain barrel really help? So let's look at some numbers to start. Is there really enough rain to make harvesting rainwater worthwhile for using it for landscape? And is there really enough rain that keeping the water that falls on my roof on my own property is going to make a difference in the creeks? The answer is yes. That's why we're here. But mathematically, 1,000 square foot roof can capture over 600 gallons of rainwater from just 1 inch of rain. So this is a great little equation. I'm going to look at it a little bit more closely in the next slide and run those numbers so that you can see what they do. This is a great equation to write down and do the math for your own house later. So an average rain event, not like some of the ones we got this past year, but in general, we get about a 1/2 inch of rain in an event. That on 1,000 square foot roof is over 300 gallons of water. So Sunnyvale gets 15 inches on average of rain a year. Doesn't sound like much. It's really not a lot, but on 1,000 square foot roof, that's over 9,000 gallons of water. Now, the average precipitation in the US is 38 inches per year. So we know we live in the Bay Area. We know that we don't get as much rain as other places in the US. But that's still over 9,000 gallons of water that could be harnessed and used for our landscape rather than being allowed to run down the streets and carry pollutants into our creeks. So we're going to take a look at that. When you are thinking about installing a rain barrel system, you're going to think about your roof size, and you're going to use that equation we just looked at. But we're not looking at your entire roof with that equation. What we're looking at is just the part of the roof that is going to be harvested. So in this image, we have a downspout in that bottom left corner, another one on the left side of the door. I've just circled both of them. And we have this area highlighted out in red. That area is saying, I'm going to hook up my rain barrels to both of these downspouts together. So I'm going to measure this whole area. I don't need to measure the other side of the house because the roof, the water is not going to run up the other side of the roof and then down the side I want to capture the water in. It's going to come just down this side of the roof. If, however, I was only going to harvest water from one of these, let's say this one, then I would only measure to the middle of this area, and this would be my roof area for that capturing. There are ways to put barrels on multiple points of the house, either connected or disconnected as separate systems. So you may do these calculations for different barrels. So if this section of my roof is only 1,000 square foot, I could figure out that, in a 1/2 inch of rain, I could get 300 gallons. So I can size my system accordingly to that. You are going to use the water in between rainstorms and rain events so that you will be able to refill throughout, even if it fills on each storm. So with that example, we're going to take a look at this nice little shed. And we're going to say this shed is 10 feet by 5 feet, or 10 feet square. Let's say 10 feet square. So that would mean that this roof on this side has only the one downspout from the gutter. And we said it's 10 feet long. And then if the whole side of the house is 10 feet, our half of it is going to be 5. So that's how we would calculate our roof area based on the number of downspouts we have. If you guys do have any questions as I'm coming to the end of each slide, feel free to type them in the Q&A, and we'll also reserve some time at the end for questions. Since we're talking about roof area, it's a great opportunity to talk about roof types for harvesting rainwater. Not all roofs are created equal when we're thinking about rainwater harvesting. Most roofs are going to be completely safe and wonderful for rainwater harvesting, but you want to avoid certain types of roofs. You want to avoid any galvanized or untreated metal or copper roofs. Those are going to have issues with oxidization where you're going to end up with the metal oxides in your water, and they will concentrate because you are funneling all the water to one place. So we really don't want to capture that and then concentrate it in one place. Wood and cedar shake shingles are fine for harvesting rainwater if they're untreated. If you are treating them regularly with an herbicide or a pesticide, again, we really don't want to be capturing that herbicide and pesticide and funneling it all into one location, because that's going to concentrate it. So you can't hook up a system if you are regularly treating your wood or cedar shakes. Solar panels are generally fine, as well as solar shingles. You can check with the manufacturer to make sure that there isn't anything that they put on them that might contaminate the water. Most flat roofs are okay, except for the ones that have asbestos. If you have a roof with asbestos in it, obviously we don't want to harvest that rainwater either. Ceramic clay or cement tiles are wonderful, as are asphalt shingles and rubber shingles. But if you're putting a brand new roof on, you're going to want to disconnect your system for the first couple of rainfalls, because you will, especially from the asphalt shingles, get a lot of pebbles and debris in those first couple of rainfalls. But once that's settled in, that will stop and you'll be able to harvest the water again. So there are different types of rainwater harvesting. You can harvest rainwater in rain barrels or cisterns, which are going to capture and store that water for later use. You can harvest rainwater in a rain garden or with pervious pavement, and those are ways that you're going to let that water soak into the ground and harvest it almost immediately. We're really not going to talk about rain gardens or pervious pavement tonight. If you are interested in those, Bosca has some other webinars coming up to discuss them. But tonight we're going to focus on rain barrels and cisterns. So as we said, they're storing the water for later use. This makes sense because it's a tank. You'd expect a tank to hold something. In this case, it's going to hold the rainwater. It's going to eliminate or decrease your need for irrigating with municipal water, depending on what size system you install. And because you're holding all of that runoff from your roof and containing it, it's going to reduce flooding and moisture, as well as erosion around your house. It's going to improve the water quality in creeks, because we already discussed about not having as much water running down the side of the roads, picking up all those pollutants as they enter those storm drains. So this is just a great way to combine all of that and have a nice aesthetic addition to your home. So the anatomy of a cistern is just a rain barrel that is 200 gallons or more. The anatomy for a cistern and a rain barrel is very similar. We're going to look at slides for both. In many cases, they will be exactly the same. It's just the size of the storage that is different. There's even a way to combine rain barrels called daisy chaining that we're going to talk about to make smaller rain barrels have the same capacity as a cistern. So this cistern here is 265 gallons. And we're going to kind of look at the anatomy from where the water comes in to where it exits. So the water comes in at the top. I'm going to change my color because I already have a lot of red on this slide. Don't know if that's much better, but so the water comes in at the top from the downspout and it immediately enters screening. So that screening that's visible is called a leaf feeder. It's angled, it's very easy to clean. It acts as screening to keep all the larger debris off. But there's also on this tank another layer of screening underneath that just to make sure that anything that got by that first one doesn't go in the tank. Most tanks, you only need one level of screening. This just happens to have two. Once the water fills in the tank, there's an optional depth gauge on the top of this tank so that we can see what percentage of water has filled in the tank for easy reference. I often don't bother to install a depth gauge because if you tap the side of the tank, you can hear when it sounds hollow that it's empty, or when it starts to sound like a little bit more of a thunk that it is, filling up and full. It's really a good idea to have strapping on any tank that is more than 2 times the height that it is the width, which is the case for this barrel. So the idea being that if your barrel is really short and wide, it's going to be very stable. You may not need the strapping for earthquake proofing, but if you have, in this case, a tall, narrow barrel, it'd be good to add some earthquake proofing. So that's an optional addition. It is not required in the plumbing code, but it is a good idea for some. What is required in the plumbing code is the screening that we talked about on the inflow, and also this overflow screening, which can be seen here, and it can be seen in the zoomed in picture there. That screening prevents mosquitoes from breeding in there. It prevents rodents and other pests from getting into the tank, and it helps to keep that water in the tank a bit cleaner. The last part of the anatomy is the output, and that's going to be very personal decision on how you're going to use the water. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Here we have an image of it connecting to a hose or connecting to some timers for drip irrigation. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's take a look at rain barrels. So as you can see, these look a little bit different than that cistern we looked at. The cistern was 265 gallons. These 4 barrels combine for a total of 220 gallons. So very similar capacity in a very different form. These are 4 55-gallon blue barrels. While the cistern we looked at was made to be a rain barrel, these are originally food grade barrels that have been repurposed to a rain barrel. They are perfect rain barrels, and it's a great way to recycle a food grade barrel since they can only be used once for food. So you can see we also have the strapping on these, like we discussed. This one we have some different outputs. We have the irrigation on the bottom here, and we also have a spigot for filling a watering can. We still have all of our screening. So we have got our screening at the top where the downspouts coming in. We also have our overflow screening down here, which is blown up in this other picture. So the basic anatomy is exactly the same. The big difference here is because this is daisy chained, it has this plumbing connecting them on the bottom. It also has these little vents on the top. You can see them in this picture on the left a little bit better. That allows the air to escape or fill as the water level changes. Since these barrels would otherwise be completely filled, the air pressure would not allow the water to fill them because they're completely sealed. So we have to be able to vent that air to allow it to go in and out. So that's one of the big differences for daisy chaining the barrels. These blue barrels can also be installed singularly as just a 55-gallon barrel. We'll talk a little bit more later about different barrel options. So let's zoom in a little bit on our inflow and our overflow. So with the inflow, you can divert all or part of the water from a downspout. Both of these forms of diverter are accepted for the rebate. Other forms are not. There are other partial diverters that do not divert a high enough percentage of the water, so they are not accepted for the rebate, but this particular diverter does. As you can see, the water would come down on the inside of your downspout. It goes in this rubber gasket and comes around into this opening and into your tank. This one is really cool because when the tank fills, it comes back out this. It goes up and over that little rubber and goes back down your downspout. This is a really great option if you have French drains, because you're reconnecting to that French drain. You don't have to figure out another spot for the water to go, but you're able to pull out and fill your rain barrel with as much of the water as your rain barrel can handle before it overflows. With both of these, you have to have that screening like we talked about. So for this upper picture, that screening would be right here where that water's coming in from the downspout. For this lower picture, the screening would likely be right there. Right where that hose connects to the gasket. So right there. Perfect. You want your overflow to be high up on the barrel. If you are using this partial diverter pictured here, your inflow and your overflow are the same tank, the same spot. So you really want that as high up on the barrel as possible, because anything below your overflow on the barrel is going to fill up. Anything above your overflow on your barrel is not going to fill. So if you were to put your overflow halfway down the barrel, you would never get more than half of a full barrel. So as high up as possible. You want to connect that to a garden, a swale, or a French drain. The legal requirement there is that it drains on your own property. So as much as you get frustrated with your neighbor, you cannot flood them out with your overflow. It needs to be on your own property, and you have to have somewhere that it can actually flow in. It can't go onto your driveway, so it's flowing straight out onto the street. It needs to be on your property, able to soak into the ground on your property. So that's at the top of the tank. So at the bottom of the tank, we have the output. That's the water that we're going to use. And we're going to set it up for easy use for however we want to use that water. So if you want to do drip irrigation, you can decide to just have a ball valve and you can set it up to manually drip irrigate when you want it to run. You can set it up with a timer. You can set it up with a smart timer. If you are going to use a smart timer, or any sort of timer, you do need to make sure that it is okay for a gravity fed system or a low pressure system. A lot of the valves, especially on the smart timers, are expecting pressure behind the valves and they will not seal properly for a rain barrel. So you want to make sure that it is made for a low pressure system. You do need a pretty fine filter. You can see in both these pictures, we have this filter. Again, this filter is specific to a gravity fed system. Some of the filters that are designed for irrigation are made for a pressurized system like you would have for municipal water. So you want to make sure you're getting one that is made for gravity fed. If you want to hose water, you can set that up as well. The filter in this upper picture, it's hard to see, but right on the end, it actually has a hose fitting. So you can connect a hose directly onto that. The filter in the lower picture does not have that option. But it didn't need it because we were connecting straight to a hose for hose watering anyway. So you don't have to necessarily choose between the drip irrigation or the hose. You may be able to set up both. If you do want to add a pump, you need to do a pump that you can just bring out and use as you're using it and then take it away. If you want to hardwire a pump in, that's where we get into the grounds of permits, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But anything that you're gonna hardwire electricity to in regards to a rainwater harvesting system is going to require a permit. So when we talk about pumps, we're talking about ones that you can plug in and use and then take away at the end. Obviously you can water with watering cans as long as your system is on the smaller side. We'll also talk about that for permitting. And you can run it into a swale or a landscape pond or a dry creek, something that the water is not going to sit there, something that it will soak into. So we kind of already talked about daisy chaining, but it's a way to allow for larger systems. Here's a couple more pictures of barrels that have been connected with daisy chaining. The one on the left is at Tierra Linda School in San Carlos, and it's 250-gallon tanks with flowers growing on the top. This is a tank design that specifically allows you to use the top as a planter. We often install these at people's homes with herb gardens on the top so that they water their herb garden with municipal water, but any excess that would normally leak out the bottom of the pot will leak into the barrels, and then the barrels can be used for the rest of the landscaping. And they also fill from the rainwater, so they get a lot of great use from that. You do get some moisture going up to keep the roots a little bit damp, which is great. It's very easy to add on additional barrels to these systems. So you can get a very long line of barrels. Here we have 4 pictured in Half Moon Bay at El Granada School as part of their HEAL program. And for Sunnyvale, the rebates are $50 depending on size. If you happen to be from another town, some of them have larger rebates for the cisterns. And so if you're connecting 4 barrels, you can qualify for the cistern rebate rather than the barrel rebate. Okay, so we've kind of covered a lot. I know I'm going a little bit fast. We will have time for Q&A at the end, but some of the things you want to consider when you're choosing your system are things we've already talked about. You want to think about that roof size, that harvesting potential. You want to think about how many downspouts you have and which ones you want to connect to. And when you're thinking about that, you want to think about how much room you have. Are you thinking about the side of your house next to your fence where there's a narrow walkway, right? You want to leave yourself room to get past it. You don't want to block a walkway. You also want to think about how you're going to use that water. Are you going to use it at your garden at the front of the house? In which case you may not want to put the barrel at the back of your house because you got to think about getting that water all the way around the house. So trying to set up the barrel close to a downspout that is close to where you want to use it. You want to think about how you're going to run the overflow, making sure that it's on your own property. You also want to think about how this is going to look. If you are artistic, I did not do this. I'm not this artistic. I found this one on Google, but I think it's beautiful. If you're artistic, you can take one of these recycled barrels and make it look absolutely beautiful for, the front of your house. If you're not so artistic, you may want to go with something you can plant a plant in, or something that you just really like the look of. And there are so many different barrels out there. I'll show you some pictures of other styles later. Also thinking about cost, the recycled ones are a lot cheaper. So if you are artistic, that's a great way to go to make them look beautiful. We talked a little bit about permitting. So let's talk permits. You do not need a permit if everything is plumbed fully exterior to a single family home and it is under 360 gallons. So if you are under 360 gallons, you do not need a permit. You can use the water however you want. You can get out a hose. You can use a watering can however you want. If you are under 5,000 gallons, you still do not need a permit as long as you are only using drip irrigation. You cannot connect to electrical or make up water supply, but if you are using drip irrigation with no hose, no watering can, that number you want to remember is 5,000. That is a huge, huge tank. So most of you are going to be under that and you will not need a permit. If you want to connect to electrical because you really want to run a pump, if you want to connect to a make-up water supply, hardwired in make-up water supply, if you want to install a system below ground level, or if you are connecting to interior plumbing for something such as flushing toilets. Those are all reasons you would need a permit. If you have any other instances where you just aren't sure, you can check out the California Plumbing Code, Chapter 16. This is not the United Plumbing Code. A lot of people, the Universal Plumbing Code. California has its own state plumbing code. Make sure you are looking at that. The regulations are different than the Universal Plumbing Code when it comes to rain barrels. I've gotten a lot of emails about that in the past. So just make sure you're looking at the California one. But this is the correct information now. There are some changes that are going to come up in 2026. But I have not been able to see those yet, exactly how they're going to pertain to this. I just got a notification that they will be updating in a year and a half. Also, this is non-potable water. Don't drink it. This is for your plants. We want to use this for landscaping. So where can I buy my rain barrel? I know this is a lot of information. We are going to send out an email with some key points as well as some web links for you to get this. But basically, you can get rain barrels at your local hardware stores or online. The recycled barrels sometimes you can find on Craigslist, but I would be fairly hesitant with the Craigslist ones. Often they aren't in as good quality as getting them from a site like Blue Barrel. Blue Barrel uses their verified dealers. Cisterns are a little bit harder to source. You're not gonna be getting those in the mail. Generally, you're not gonna be ordering those on Amazon, but you can pick them up at Urban Farmer in San Francisco. San Lorenzo Lumber in Santa Cruz is a great source for those, and sometimes other hardware stores will be able to get them into their store for you to pick up. So there are other options. You just need to go in and talk to the hardware store to see what they offer. Generally, with the basic kits, they will have the full kit included. For recycled barrels or cisterns, you will have to plumb it separate. You will have to plumb the barrel separately without having a kit fully provided for you. So the basic kits are usually a little bit easier for the DIY. Maintenance is, of course, very important. So some of these are required for the California Plumbing Code, and some of these are just Chris advises. So I'm going to make clear which ones those are. Cleaning your gutters. The California State Plumbing Code says your gutters must be cleaned twice a year if you hook up a rainwater harvesting system to it. Generally, I recommend doing that more often in the winter, especially if you have any big trees right over your house, because they get pretty full pretty fast during our rainy season. I also, if you're only going to do it twice a year, I recommend fall and spring, so that you're doing it after all those summer winds and before the rains start coming. Check and empty your leaf heater. That State of California Plumbing Code says 4 times a year, all of your leaf heaters and screens need to be cleaned and emptied. Chris says you should do it at least once a month, probably after every storm, because your system's just going to work a lot better. It doesn't take much time to clean the screens. You're just going to look at the screen, brush off the dirt, maybe give it a quick rinse or a scrub with a brush and put it back on. It takes less than 5 minutes. So might as well do it more often. If you have a first flush diverter, you should be doing that twice a year. Minimally, realistically, after every storm, you're going to want to drain that. State of California Plumbing Code says visually inspect all valves and components at least once a year. Chris says you're probably walking by your barrel more often than once a year if it's on your own house, so keep an eye on it. I mean, you're going to be walking by. Visually inspecting means you are looking at it and saying, hey, look, they're all there. Great. I don't see any leaks. They're all working. Excellent. That's just going to keep your system functioning nicely, and you're going to head off having any major leaks or drip if something does go wrong. The plumbing code doesn't actually have a requirement for draining your system, but you should really use that harvested water as often as possible, and realistically, don't let it sit there for more than 5 years. It's water, it needs to be used. It's gonna have a really funky smell the longer you leave it there, just because of the leaves and everything else in it. Okay, so talking about using that water, we want to use it. You want to use it as regularly as possible. Empty your barrels out between storms. We've talked about how you can use it. It's great for washing tools. It's great for gardening and landscaping. We kind of talked about connecting drip irrigation. If you are going to connect drip irrigation, you're not going to be connecting to that municipal line. You're going to be connecting a whole new system, because like we said about the valves and the screens not being compatible, the whole drip irrigation system is not going to be compatible with your rain barrel, and you have to have those plumbed separately anyway. So it's very easy to lay down a new line of irrigation rather than trying to make it work together or get a permit to connect them. The biggest thing for me is trying to sink it into the ground to increase that groundwater storage. And as we just mentioned, you do need a permit if you want to connect it to a toilet for flushing. Now, the biggest question, we're kind of coming closer to the end now. I want to leave lots of time for questions, and I can go back to any slides because I know I went kind of fast. But the biggest question that I always get is, I want to use this for irrigation. Can I, that's an extra word. Can I use this as irrigation for edible plants? So the main answer is maybe. I know that's not the answer everyone wants, but you can water certain fruits and vegetables with rainwater, but you want to avoid it for others. The rule of thumb is, if it grows up and the part you're eating is off the ground, you're probably fine. So vining veggies, bushy berries, tall bushy herbs or veggies, and citrus or anything that's on a tree is going to be completely fine. The roots are going to filter any pollutants that we might have. Fruits and vegetables that you want to avoid are anything like the leafy greens, celery, lettuce, ground level berries like a strawberry, basil, oregano, carrots, potatoes, anything that grows in the ground, any root vegetables. You want to avoid all those. So anything that might actually have the water, the rainwater sitting on it, is going to have a better chance of taking up contaminants. Now, that being said, there have been studies done, especially in Australia, where they heavily rely on rainwater to figure out how much pollutants can get in the soil and how bad the uptake can be. And they have deemed everything to be fine and completely edible, and that none of the uptake was bad enough to harm anyone. That being said, we live in California and in the Bay Area, and we get really bad forest fires in the area. The one that I could think of the most when I'm teaching this is in 2020. The entire sky stayed red for a day, and it was just really eerie, and there was ash on all of our cars and on everything when we came out. And those forest fires aren't just trees. They are homes, they are cars, they are a lot of chemicals that end up in that. So our roofs take a lot of that, which is why it's sometimes good to disconnect your rain barrel for that first storm, to let that kind of naturally disperse a little bit before you concentrate everything in your rain barrel for the next storms of the year. But it's also just knowing that, there's bird poop on a roof, there's other stuff that we want the roots and the stems and the stalks of our plants to be able to filter everything out. We don't want anything that's directly touching our food. So just something to think about when you're want to use this for irrigating edible plants. And as always, we're going to water at the roots, much like this little pepper plant. We're going to water at the roots. We're not watering, on the leaves. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions. Please type your questions in the Q&A. And if you have a question that is difficult to type, feel free to raise your hand. We will unmute you, and that way you can speak your question out loud. And I know I went pretty fast. I'm also gonna put a slide up with some of the upcoming um classes that Bosca is offering in case you guys are interested in any of those. I know we went through that pretty fast earlier. And I have another slide on the rain barrel rebates, which we can put up in a minute as well.
I have a question for you, Chris.
Okay.
And first off, I just wanted to say excellent presentation. I know that I learned a lot. My piece of paper next to me has a lot of notes, so I'm really excited to share this information with my housemate and get a rain barrel. um, but I wanted to ask about the filters, and I know that it looks like there's not too much maintenance on for the rain barrels, but I wanted to ask if you need to clean those frequently or maybe after each storm, and also if you recommend making your own filters or if it's best to buy them.
Are you talking about the screens?
Yes, sorry, filter screens, yes.
Yeah, so I recommend cleaning them after every storm, but legally it's required 4 times a year.
Okay.
So every 3 months, those screens need to be cleaned legally. And so any barrel you get is going to come with some sort of screening unless you get let me go back to this one, sorry. Unless you get a recycled food grade barrel like this. If you order it from Blue Barrel, you can get it in a kit that comes with a screening. You can also use something like this leaf eater as your inflow screening. Here, what you'll see is I just used window screening, a fine window screening for the output, for the overflow, and that works. The one issue with window screening is it tends to rip. So when you are checking it every 3 months and cleaning it regularly, you may need to replace it more than something like the leaf eater.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Chris while we have her?
I thought I saw a hand go
I
up.
did too. I don't know if that was a mistake or if it was because I had a question, but if anyone has a question, wants to raise their hand or type it in the Q&A, um, we've got some time here, so no hurry.
So I can talk a little bit more about the rebates while I'm waiting for questions, because I know a
Sure.
lot of people are really interested in those, if that's okay.
Definitely.
And Izzy, feel free to jump in. Um, so Sunnyvale rebates through Bosca are $50 per barrel. You can do that twice, in the course of your living at this house. So if you decide, you want to put a barrel in the front of the house and one in the back of the house, you can do that at each. The food grade barrels, you can often do the installation for about that $50. So the rebate covers almost all of that with the food grade barrels. For a barrel like the one pictured here, this is an 50-gallon earth-minded rain station. And these are a little bit more pricey. They're pretty, they're designed to be a rain barrel, they're not recycled, and you can use them as a planter box. They run anywhere from, I've seen them for as cheap as 90, and they go anywhere up to like 150 through different online retailers. So those are going to be a little bit more expensive. So really deciding what is going to work for you cost wise. When you get up into cisterns, you tend to end up $1 to $2 per gallon, depending on the size that you're going to. The rebate is not just in Sunnyvale. If you go on, depending on if you are within the Bosca service area or the Valley Water service area, they both have rebates. The Bosca rebates are most of San Mateo County, as well as other cities throughout the Bay. Valley Water is Santa Clara County. So you'll probably know who your water provider is, and you can look at which service district you're in to see that rebate. And the rebates do vary based on city. So on Bosco's website, you can see what rebates available. Um, I don't have all the notes in front of me. I just happen to know that the city of Burlingame can get up to $100. And I know there's some other cities within the Bosco that can get a larger amount because the city is able to match the Bosco rebate. So Izzy, this is a great question for you. The question is, do you need to apply for the rebate before you buy the barrels? What's the process like? Can you enlighten us a little bit on that?
That's a great question. I do not believe, I believe you can purchase the rain barrel before you have someone come look at your property. I would need to double check this, but I don't see an issue with buying a rain barrel that you're interested in, and then before you go ahead and make changes. I think that applies more to the lawn conversion rebates, not necessarily the rain barrel rebates. So people who want to transform their lawn from grass to drought tolerant landscapes, I believe that that refers to that more than the rain barrels. But I can double check. And as Chris mentioned, we will send an email with key points and helpful websites and also the link to this presentation. So I can include that information there as well.
And this is the different rebates that are offered by Valley Water are listed here on the right. If you go to their website, they do have a cap of $3,000 per household per lifetime rebate, but there are lots of different ways to get to that amount, and there's lots of great options. Definitely start the application process before you install anything or you do anything. And they will walk you through what you're allowed to do at each stage. So I got another question here about the water being diverted. So I'm gonna go back to my thing. So let's actually use this one. So in both of these images, the water isn't really it's no longer running down a downspout. We cut the downspout here, so all the water goes into this tank. There is no water coming out of that downspout that doesn't go into these rain barrels, and once these barrels are all full, then it comes down the overflow. For other systems, let me find a nice clear picture. I think actually this one has a pretty good picture. For other pictures here, you can see the water is coming down that downspout. It's getting diverted into the planter, and then let's try to make that a little cleaner. So the water is coming down the downspout into the planter. When it fills up, then it's going to go back out the same pipe and continue down the downspout. So there are different ways of installing this that the water is diverted differently. The idea is however you install it, the barrels will fill as full as they can from the amount of rain that we got. We have another question here that says, is there anywhere that we can find printed information on how to DIY rain barrels and what rules apply to them? So Chapter 16 of the California Plumbing Code is going to tell you what rules apply. I outlined them on my permit slide, so that's really good information as well as what we were talking about with maintenance and throughout this whole thing. You know, I tried to be very clear on what is required within the plumbing code. If you may have missed anything, this webinar will be available on the Bosco website as well as other webinars with the same information that you can watch through again to take more notes. If you like reading code, legal codes, California Plumbing Code Chapter 16 is going to have everything you need to know. If you want to DIY rain barrels, Blue Barrel Systems has designed their own setup for recycled blue barrels. And they have a lot of videos that they make available to their customers. They have a lot of instructions, written instructions, and they make it very clear on how to take the recycled Blue Barrel and turn it into a rain barrel that qualifies for the rebate. So that's a great resource as well, and we'll include that in the email. These are great questions. I really love this picture that Valley Water did for their rebates. So I'm just gonna put that slide up right now. Okay, Izzy, I'm not sure if we're gonna have any more questions. And we are right at our hour mark.
Yeah, well, if we do have any questions, Chris and I are going to send that email, so feel free to, reply and ask any other questions. Sunnyvale also has an answer point email that I help respond to. It's green@sunnyvale.ca.gov. I will type that in the chat really quickly if any questions do come up in the meantime. green@sunnyvale.ca.gov. But yeah, I don't think we have any other questions at the moment. Just seeing some thank yous. So thank you so much, Chris, for, again, a wonderful presentation. I'm sure we all learned a lot. And yeah, please let us know if anyone has any questions. Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Izzy. Have a
Thanks.
nice night.
See you too. Bye-bye.